Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining today's session. Let's just give it a minute to let everyone join and then we'll get straight in. Hello to everyone just joining. We're just going to give it a minute to let everyone get in and then we're going to get started. Amazing. So it is 12:01, so I think we can jump straight in. So thank you everyone for taking the time out of your lunch to join us for today's webinar on social media. Today on the call we have me, the Marketing and Commerce Manager here at BitGive, Sahil, colleague who most of you probably already know, and Teresa, who you may have been introduced to before, and I'm sure will introduce herself shortly. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. At the bottom of your Zoom panel, you'll see a chat box function. Please do set that to everyone, and you'll be able to use that throughout the session to talk to people, introduce yourselves, and so on. You'll also see a Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom panel. Please do click on that and send us any questions. We'll get to them at the end of the session, and it's important that you put your questions there so we don't miss them. If you have, for any reasons, needing accessibility, there is a show captions button at the bottom of your Zoom panel. Please click on that and captions should show for this webinar. And of course, as always, this webinar is being recorded and will be uploaded to our YouTube channel after the session. So you will be able to share with colleagues or review back if you need to. And I think that's it. If you do have any questions that we don't pick up, please do send us an email. But otherwise, I'm going to hand over to Teresa.
Thanks so much. Hello, everyone. So today we're going to talk about social media and best practices for end-of-year giving. Just an introduction, I'm Teresa Lita. I'm a marketing freelancer. I've been working in 11 years in social media and content marketing. And I just love keeping up with all the latest trends and see how we can really use them more practically, whether it's about social media or digital channels in general. Yes, feel free to use the chat if you have any questions, and make sure to keep an eye. So talking about social media, it might be good to check in with everyone first. How many of you are running a BitGive campaign for the first time? And those of you who have run in the past, how many times have you tried it? Would be good to check in with everyone. And yes, the reminder also to use the chat and make sure the blue box says everyone. First time, looking at the chat, third year, second time. Many of you for the first time, second time. Perfect, really good mix. First time running BitGive, first give charity. Great, so it should be a good combination to make sure that everyone helps each other really. So why should you involve social media? Obviously, we're talking about digital fundraising and you want to make the most of your channels. So social media really helps you to connect with your audience. You're able to tell a story. It's not just about asking for donation. You want to make sure that you tell a story first. And you're able to nurture those relationships with existing donors and obviously find new opportunities. So it's obviously the short-term goal of attracting donations and make sure that you attract them as a specific period of time. But also you want to make sure that you cultivate that for the long term so that they're able to come back again. And you're also building that relationship. Someone might be a follower now, but they might turn into a donor, for example. So when we're thinking of social media, sometimes it can be the starting point. If you think how we all use social media, you see many things when you to a specific channel, and then you want to make sure that you grab someone's attention and you direct them to the fundraising page or your website. And they might be ready to donate. So this is great. It's the ideal journey, but they might not be in that stage yet. So you want to make sure that even if they find about you on a specific channel, that you still build that relationship so that they receive more updates and they're aware and they know how they can support you in different ways. So who is on social media? Who do we, there are many different audiences. So it's not just about a straightforward case of I want to attract donors and I'm directing them to the fundraising page. There are many different types of audiences that you can really attract. So first of all, the obvious, your followers. those who already follow you on your social channels, and you want to make sure that you direct them towards different options. So someone might be ready to turn to a donor, so they want to donate. Someone might not be in a case right now to donate, but they still want to support you. So that can go towards engagement. They can share your post, they can support you in the campaign, they can direct you to more people. And that also goes in the importance of social media in terms of relationship building. It's not always about just asking for donations, but you want to make sure that you use those channels to build the community. So then beyond the followers, there are the supporters. So the difference is the level of proximity to you. Someone might be following you, but the supporter might also support engaging with you, spreading the word, being part of your campaign. And ideally, you want to turn your followers into supporters and the supporters into donors. And then there's also your team. You want to make sure that you involve your team, your trustees, your board, your volunteers to support your campaign. They're not the ones who would probably go straight into the donation, but they can really support your campaign to extend your network. It's not just you, for example, talking about your campaign. Your team can also share it on your own networks, and their own network is going to see the content. So it's really amplifying the content and how many people see that. Then there are the donors, the existing ones, those who want to know about your campaign, and it's easier for them to continue with donations, but also potential donors, those who might not have donated in the past. They might be following you, or they might just see your content from others, and they could make a great case of like turning into donations. So you want to think, how can I use social media in a way that my content appeals to different users? Not every piece of content will appeal to all of them at the same time, but you want to have this balance, going from followers to supporters to donors, and also exploring opportunities. You want to think, how can I appeal to corporate partners? How can I make sure that I also find opportunities to go beyond my network again? So how do you use social media for your end of year giving? So thinking of what we just discussed on the different audiences and how you can really use social media, there are 3 different ways to keep in mind also when creating content. First of all, it's about raising awareness. So this is about those who don't know enough about you and you want to have that introduction. You can talk about your work, share about the impact. You can explain how someone can find more about you, so you can direct them to your website. And also you want to talk about your campaign, of course. You want to share more details, what it's about and how someone can support you. Then you want to build engagement, and this is what we said about community building. You want to connect with your supporters. Social media makes channels that are easier to connect and listen to your supporters and what they prefer to hear and see from you. You want to nurture these relationships, so this is not just about one campaign. How can you make sure that they enjoy your content, that they follow you, that they subscribe to your newsletter after checking you on Facebook? And you really want to make sure that you treat it this way. It's not just transactional. It's not just about a fundraising campaign. You want to make sure that they really support your cause, they believe in what you're working on, and they want to support you in the long term. And then you also obviously want to convert to donations, and this is really important. Social media is not always the direct channel in terms of converting to donations, but it's also a really important channel to help you move them closer to donations. So someone might find out about your campaign through social, and then they receive an email, and it's easier for them after seeing it on social to turn into a donor. So you want to make sure you really talk about your campaign. You want to have that connection, whether it's with storytelling, involving your team, involving your network, to help everyone understand the importance of supporting your cause. And obviously, when it comes to a specific time of the year, like the Christmas challenge, you also want to talk about why they need to donate at a specific period. It's about doubling the impact. It can really make a bigger contribution for you, and it can really support your work. So you really want to tap into these details and the stories that can help them and convince them to donate at a specific time of the year. Something that's also useful with social media, and it's really increasing the last few years, is micro donations. So this is pretty much a case of creating messaging that really gets followers to understand that even £5 can make a difference. And you can create stories that you explain how £5 translate into specific points of impact. So it's not just someone feeling that I can't really contribute a big amount, so I feel that I shouldn't probably donate smaller ones. You really want to make sure, and it's really working well on social media, for someone to feel that even £5 with doubling the impact, you can really make a difference. So you can still create messages that make it easy for someone to feel that I can still support you, even if that's my limit and this is what I can contribute to. So it's not just looking for big opportunities, and it's also trying to find the ways how someone can support you in whatever limit they feel comfortable. So let's look at some best practices. Today, the session is about established social media channels, and we're also having a session tomorrow on emerging channels. So today we're going to talk about Facebook, Twitter, X, LinkedIn, and Instagram. Some really interesting stats from a report from MNR UK that was released a few months ago. So for every 1,000 email addresses for nonprofits, there's an average of 736 Facebook fans, 229 Twitter followers, and 141 Instagram followers. That obviously is just the benchmark, but it's really interesting to just understand and compare on where nonprofits are more active, what are the most popular channels. And also it can give you an idea if you want to just see where you are. And sometimes it's good to see that it doesn't have to be about big numbers. And it's good even with 100 followers, if you're able to talk to them, it can really make a difference. And when it comes to the most popular channels, according to the report, almost all nonprofits were active on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And this is a graph, again, from the same report, which explains the levels of being active on different channels from different charities. Facebook is obviously the first. Twitter was second. That was a report gathered stats from last year. I sense that might have changed this year. We will see that in a few months in the new report. Instagram is third. YouTube almost the same with LinkedIn. So it's really interesting to see how, despite all the changes through the years of social channels, Facebook is consistently the most popular channel. And it would be good, before we jump into Facebook, just to confirm with everyone, what are the channels that you are active or you're planning to use as part of your campaign? Feel free to share the chat and we can start. Facebook, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Facebook predominantly, also Twitter and Instagram, Facebook ads, boosts, Insta, X, Instagram, LinkedIn, everything minus Snapchat, Reddit, and Pinterest. Facebook, X, LinkedIn. So this is pretty much the case, what we saw here. Good to see the mix of channels. And yes, they are the most popular channels for many charities, no matter where you are or how comfortable you are. And let's start from Facebook. Obviously, when we're talking about Facebook, there are many different ways to make the most of the platform. Obviously, the start is Facebook pages, which is the page for your organization. But there are also the personal profiles, thinking again of the network and how you can get more people to support your campaign. There are Facebook groups, so if you want to find more about local opportunities and groups that can be useful for your campaign. And on the bigger picture, in terms of fundraising, there are the challenges and the fundraisers where people can also run fundraisers on their own. So how do you use Facebook? There are many different ways, obviously. Some examples, you can share campaign updates on your page, and that's really important. You want to make sure that you explain when the campaign is launching, what it is about, what's the theme, and being able to tell a story. You want to make sure that you get your network to share the campaign, and that's what we said, the importance of the network. Facebook is a personal channel. How can you make sure that the content you create is something that your network feels that I can spread the word, I can share it with my network, and obviously that creates more opportunities. You can also, as we said, encourage micro donations. So how can we say, this is the link, even £5 can make a difference, and really explain. It's not just about making the ask, but making sure that you share the impact, you share how it can really still make a difference. And also you can post on relevant groups, what we said. You want to think, what are the groups that my audience is spending time? How can I find opportunities to connect with them? Some recommendations on the frequency of posting, obviously that really depends on every organization. During the campaign, you can explore, for example, in the week of Christmas challenge, you can even share once a day if you feel that it makes sense. And beyond the campaign, you probably want to limit that to 3 or even 4 times a week, but really it's just an indication. You don't need to post many times if you feel that it affects the engagement. So it's better to have good content rather than just posting every single day. So what works well and how has the algorithm evolved really on Facebook through the years? Stories and images always work great. You want to make sure that you have the right visual content, but you also tell a story along with that. Videos also work well, and it's also a good idea to think, how can I tell a story in a way that someone seeing the video, they can really stay engaged from the very first seconds. So it's not about 10-minute videos that you wait for like 3 minutes to get into the point. You want to make sure even 30 seconds, you can still tell more about your campaign and what it's about. It's definitely a good idea to experiment with different formats. It's probably best to just see what works for your organization. And it's good to start now before your campaign, just to look at your analytics, see what's working, see what are the kind of posts that work well for my audience, and how can I create similar content as part of my campaign. And then you also want to find opportunities. Obviously, Facebook is owned by Meta. Meta also has Instagram. You can also have Threads now, which we'll talk about tomorrow. How can you cross-promote the content? Sometimes when you share Reels on Instagram, they can also show up on Facebook. Or when you create a Facebook story, you can also show up on Instagram if you choose to share both. So how can you think in a way that you create content that makes sense for more than one channel? So before we jump into Twitter, I wanted to check some ideas from others, especially those who are on a Christmas challenge in the past. What are the kind of things that you found that work well? And if you're running a campaign for the first time, it might be good to think where you are now. What are the things that you're trying to, what are the content ideas you want to create for this year? Just to help everyone to make the most of Instagram or Facebook. I see most of you have a Facebook account. Samantha says we have used personal stories and got an ambassador. That sounds great, especially having an ambassador, having someone who can really support your campaign. Sarah says sharing eye-catching stats as we are a research charity. This year we're focusing on storytelling more as well. Really good idea. And stats can work really well, especially if it complements your organization. Blending the big give and our branding works. This is also a really good point. You also want to make sure that your campaign is also a way for someone to understand that it's linked to your branding. It's definitely a good start to have and that's the example I'm having the screenshot here. You can use the templates. It's a great starting point, having the big give templates, but you also want to think, how can I make them more tailored to my organization? Margaret says storytelling, short video clips. Really good idea. Emma says this will be our first year of promoting over social media. Perfect, some really good examples. And it's just obviously figuring out what works best, of course, for your organization. Jenny says sharing ambassador video clips, but honestly, Facebook seems totally dead for us. This is also a good point, and it really depends on every organization. I've heard many cases when organic posts on Facebook are really hard nowadays, unless you pay and boost your posts. So if you already have engagement, that's really great. You want to continue. But if you feel that you're posting many times a week and it really doesn't get any engagement, you might want to think, is it the right channel for me? Is there a way to have some sort of re-engagement campaign? You might want to ask more questions, get your network to support you more, share the content, just to see how visible your posts are. Samantha says we have done film as well, and we are doing it again. Perfect, really good ideas. And jumping on Twitter X. So Twitter used to be a very popular platform for years. It's great to engage a wider audience, going beyond your existing followers. And it's also great to be a little bit more personal and try to connect with your supporters. And it's great also for big giving days, whether it's Giving Tuesday or any other giving, like Christmas giving challenge, you can use the hashtag and attract a bigger audience. But obviously Twitter also has been to a lot of changes the last year. And today we're going to look at the best practices, but also tomorrow, looking at the new channels, we will also have a think on whether Twitter is still the right channel for you. And if you're planning to leave to find alternatives, what's the best strategy for that? So today we're focusing on those who still want to use Twitter X. So how can you use it? It's always a good idea to join popular hashtags. Again, Giving Tuesday is trending every year. Christmas challenge is definitely good when you're running your own campaign. You can also create your own hashtags and you can use it along with the popular ones. And it's also a good idea to just you click on the popular hashtags to see what others are doing. There might be opportunity to connect with others. There might be other organizations. There might be individuals who might be interested in similar causes. And it's really a good idea to reach a wider audience. Twitter is also great to engage with journalists and media. There were many cases where you could find a story, someone is writing about something similar on a local level, and it's just bringing that barrier in terms of communication, making it easier, really. And you want to make sure that you understand how Twitter is different from the other channels. In terms of frequency, for example, you can just post as many times as you want. There isn't that limitation on a post having to stay on a feed for a certain amount of time. It's really up to you how many times you want to post. But even if you post 10 times a day, it really doesn't make a difference. It doesn't mean that someone will see every single post. So you might want to increase that frequency compared to other channels. Or you can make it more conversational. So it's really up to you to see what works, what your resources, and how you can feel that something makes sense on all the content you create. And then beyond the campaign, again, you want to think, what's the kind of content that I want to share to make sure it makes sense. So you don't want too many posts, but at the same time, if you feel that you have enough content and you have engagement, you can totally share more posts during the day and the week. So what works well on Twitter, X, Threads, so the series of tweets when you share stories, it's a really good idea because it's a nice way to just tell a story in a bigger number of characters. So you can just think of the story first, write it down in a document, and then split into different tweets. Visual stories work really well. And especially with the campaigns, it's really a good idea to share an update on how you're doing towards the progress. It could be at the start, halfway, how much you still need to raise, and really explaining how someone can make a difference. GIFs work really well if you want to just share a quick reply, if you want to have some sort of reaction and grab someone's attention. It's always an easy way and really good eye-catching on Twitter. Short videos also work really well. And it might be, again, an idea what we discussed about Facebook, telling a story using some numbers and creating very short clips that can really get more information than an image, but not too many details. And something that really works well on Twitter is also sharing frequent campaign updates. If it's just about a week of Christmas challenge or Giving Tuesday, a specific day, you can share as many updates as you want. It doesn't feel overwhelming compared to other channels. So it's definitely the right approach in terms of feeling that you can share more content. Again, linking at where your audience is, and if you feel that you still have engagement the last few months, this is definitely a good idea. But if you think that it doesn't really work for me, then you might want to think, what are the channels that you spend more time, and what's the most engaging for your audience? So I'd love to hear some ideas for those who have used Twitter the previous years to see what you've done for your campaign. And if someone hasn't used it, we're happy to help with more ideas. Emma mentioned earlier, we're really aware of digital exclusion, so are considering non-digital options, newsletters, local radio promotion. This is also a good idea. Obviously, we're talking about digital channels now, but you also want to think, where is your audience? Where are they spending more time? It's not just about being digital. You might also want to explore other opportunities like these ones. So Anthony is asking, how do you make a GIF? You can find existing GIFs just by clicking on Twitter. There's a button that says GIF. But also you can just find online tools. You can find a list of free resources where you pretty much turn any video into a GIF. The GIF has to be up to 8-9 seconds. So it's really just a very short video. It's usually just one reaction, one number, something that's very visual, but still doesn't really last long. And tagging is pretty much when you mention other accounts. So instead of just talking, like the example, the screenshot that I have right here, this account just tagged, mentioned Big Give. So you're mentioning Big Give because it's the campaign that you're joining, the Christmas challenge. And it's also a good idea to reach a wider audience. So if for example, Big Give sees the post, there are more chances for them to see your campaign, to find more details, and also to retweet you. So you want to make sure you tag and mention the right people. It could be your partners, could be your team, could be the example like Big Give, and make sure that you really find more opportunities for more people to notice you. Olivia says Twitter doesn't work well for us. We use it during the campaign to push people to our website. We don't use it regularly, so it doesn't really work well. It's really a good point. If it's something that doesn't really work and you haven't used it, doesn't mean that all of a sudden you want to go and post 10 tweets a day. So if it still works to get people to your website, that's definitely a good idea. But you don't need to go on a channel that you really didn't use before and all of a sudden stay really active for your campaign. And just mentioning again, and we'll talk more about that tomorrow on the alternatives of Twitter. So the changes the last year, there have been many changes. And I think the most important thing is that Twitter X is really unpredictable. Since Elon Musk took over almost a year ago, there have been many changes, and there are many concerns also from an ethical and safety prospect. And there, for example, practical ones, there's reduced reach and engagement. Many organizations have already left, whether it's about safety, ethics, or just feeling that it's not making any sense for them, their audience is not there, they left. And also there have been some issues. I saw several accounts saying issues with analytics, so it doesn't feel as accurate as before. And also you can run advertising unless you're a paid subscriber. So adding them all up, there are many reasons if you think of that if it's not working for you, you might want to explore other channels. And we can talk more about that tomorrow, but it's definitely something to consider when we're talking about the channel. Samantha says, Twitter has not really been used by us. Our audience is more on Facebook. However, it's a good opportunity to build a different audience. Definitely agree. And there are many things that Twitter has that other channels don't really have at that extent. It's good for catching up with news stories, covering live events, joining big awareness days. So there are still things that can be useful. But if you feel that you don't really get the engagement, or even for ethics and safety concerns that you don't want to be there, then it's totally okay. It makes sense to have that decision at some point and say, I don't think it makes sense for me, I'll just use other channels. And let's talk about Instagram now. So obviously Instagram, again, owned by Meta, which also has Facebook. It's a very visual platform and it's great. It has consistent engagement. It's been growing the last year. And it's also something that is really good about community building. So it's good to share campaign updates, and that could be content on your feed. You can also share stories. You can go live and do live streaming, whether it's about your team talking about the campaign or inviting someone else. So if you have an ambassador, if you're working with a partner, it might be a good idea to experiment with more videos. And you want to tell a story. It's really important on LinkedIn to just understand storytelling. And LinkedIn is really great about community building. So it's where you want to do what we said earlier about cultivating relationships for long term. So it's not just about having straight donations, which it can still work and it can be great, but also you want to build that community. You want to make sure that someone who's interested in your cause, they follow you and they support you and they share the content on their stories to reach a bigger network. This is also working really well on Instagram, is the idea of micro influencers. And this is not about someone who has 1 million followers. It's not a celebrity. It's someone within your community. They might have 500 followers, but it might be a really good audience for your charity. So it doesn't have to be thinking big. You might just notice a supporter who really shares many of your posts or likes many of your posts. And you want to approach them and say, I'm running this campaign soon. If you want to support me, here is some content before I launch the campaign. So you want to think, how can I involve my community to make them aware of the campaign even before you're launching it, and trying to make them feel that they're part of it and they're really supporting you as much as possible. So frequency of posting, again, it really depends on how you are using it up to now. The difference you might want to think is in between the feed and the stories. So when you post on your feed, which is your profile, I would say could be 3, 4, 5 times a week, could be once a day, really depends on how much you want to post about your campaign. But thinking again that the campaign lasts for a week, the Christmas challenge, or if you think for the rest of the month for December, you want to talk a little bit more than what you would usually do. So if beyond the campaign you're posting, let's say 3 times a week, you might want to experiment now with 4 or 5 times. And when thinking of the stories, obviously there are no limits. You can post as many stories as you want, as long as it's engaging, as long as it's interesting. You can ask questions. You can share more details about the campaign. You share updates. They only last 24 hours, so it's totally okay to share as many as you want. So what works well on Instagram? We mentioned already, it's really about authentic storytelling. So you want to make sure, how can I share an image, a video, but also having the right caption along with it. There are really many posts where a photo along with a really good caption, it can be a long form text, it and be sharing more details and really complementing each other works really great. Yeah, as we mentioned, we want to think of involving your community. How can you create content that your supporters like it enough to share it with their networks? How can you think of ideas to make your content more engaging? And that could be something of trying with stories, try to boost that engagement, try to ask stories, questions, and really think what would be something that my audience would really enjoy enough to share and support my campaign. You want to also explore with ideas mentioned about the live streaming, having behind the scenes content, if it's relevant to your organization, could be your team, could be volunteers, everyone working on the ground. So what are the kind of things that share more details about your campaign to make it more specific? And then you can also use relevant hashtags similar to other channels. It's always a good idea. I love using on every channel, clicking on the right hashtag just to get more inspiration, connect with others. You might want to explore people who talk about similar things, and you can follow them, having the chances to also have you follow back. So you want to think, how can I expand my network? How can I find more ideas? And how can I be more creative? So the screenshot that I shared, the example, it's a really nice way to talk about impact and what we said on how you can share more details about your campaign and how can someone support you. So this example, you explained how £15 pretty much translate to more than double the amount of what the charity gets. So this is something that really helps the supporter to understand that even a £15 contribution gets way more impact for the specific time of the year. And you can also explain in the caption where this money goes. So it's a really nice example to think of how your campaign should really be about explaining how you want to make a difference. Why is the specific time of the year that someone should support you? So I'd love to hear some ideas on what you've done before on Instagram. And it's a very engaging channel, so it's definitely a good idea to experiment more with that as part of your campaign. Sarah mentioned earlier about Women in Sport UK on their Instagram. I'll definitely have a look. Have you tried any of these ideas, or have you tried something else that works? Let's try and help those who are joining for the first time. So Sally says, we did a video with lots of things we had done this year, flipping between different members of the team. That sounds great. Susanna says, hoping to create some behind the scenes videos of volunteers packing food parcels for people at the food bank. That's a really good example. That's exactly the case of thinking of new content opportunities. How can you just find content ideas into everything that's happening anyway? Yes, Sharon agrees, behind the scenes content work for us. It's something that's really relatable, and it's always a good idea to have such content. Jenny says Instagram is our biggest channel. We post lots of stats and try to post at least one reel a week. We'll try to keep that up during the campaign. Seems like good practice in general. Natasha, we use video content to share behind the scenes footage of the work that the campaign will support, how they will help get it from R&D to performance. Really good idea. Faye says we usually do just post with some copy, but are trying short videos from beneficiaries this year. I want to explore stories more. And something that's really also good, you probably already do it, most of you, is experiment with Canva. Obviously, I'm not a designer, so I always love having tools like Canva to just be more creative. You can find existing templates. You can create content that's different sizing for stories and feed, or also try with reels for videos. And it's really giving you that creativity and the boost to feel that you don't always need to spend too much time. It's more about trying to think of the content ideas, as we said, about behind the scenes content, or playing with stories and engagement just to see what works well. Amy says polls and quizzes on the Instagram stories work really well for us. And that's really good for the engagement, because when someone engages with your stories, they also see more of your posts in the future. So it's really a good idea for the engagement and also for the long-term success. Huge advocate of Canva, so easy to use, and you can get pro free if you're a nonprofit. Really good point. I definitely recommend to go that route and find a pro account, because it has a lot of benefits. You can create your own brand kit. You can have all your colors, your logos, everything in one place. And you get additional assets, images, videos to give it a try. Olivia says we put meaty stories on the feed with light-hearted campaign updates as stories. We're going to try Canva-produced reels to explain the issue. So Canva, Anthony, is an image design tool. It's free, and also nonprofits can get an upgraded account. And it just makes it easier to create images. So like the one you see on the screen, obviously, before all these free tools, you will just need a designer. But with tools like Canva, you can get different templates. You can search, for example, I want to create an image quote, and you can see different examples. So you just drag and drop and create in a few minutes. Ola is asking, is it worth paying to boost on Facebook? And I would say if you have the budget, especially during the campaign, it might be a good idea, not necessarily if you haven't used Facebook before, if it's already really inactive. But if you really want to make sure that your audience notice a specific post, it might be a good idea. And the good thing with Facebook and also Instagram, which they're both on the same platform for advertising, is that they're not really expensive compared to other channels. So even £50, you can reach an audience of hundreds of people. So you want to think, what's the right content that I want to boost to make sure that everyone sees? It could be about your campaign. If you're creating a video that's probably your biggest piece of content, this is probably the one you want to boost. Or if it's a specific call to action, something that's very visual and explaining your campaign, so that's the post you want to boost. Perfect. And let's talk about LinkedIn. And of course, we'll continue the conversation with questions afterwards. So LinkedIn is a platform that exists for many years now, and it really was underrated. But the last year, I hear more nonprofits are jumping on it again. And it also sees increased engagement in general. So it might be something to consider more. So it's a professional platform. It started as a channel where people connect with others and they're finding jobs. So it's very clear on how someone uses it. It's great if you want to explore partnerships. You might want to highlight existing relationships, but it's also really great if you want to involve your team, your board, your trustees. It really helps in terms of employee advocacy. So there is one thing where it's your company page, and that's when you share about your campaign. But also it's a great idea to involve your team, create content in advance, and get them to support your work. So when it comes to frequency of posting, again, it really depends. But if you are posting beyond the campaign, let's say 2-3 times a week, you might want to increase it a little bit more. But something to consider with LinkedIn is that the posts last quite some time on the feed. You might post something today and people might still engage with that next week. So this is definitely good. So you don't want to post too many things. You want to create posts that make sense. So even if it's just twice a week, if it's good content, that is totally okay. So what works well? Storytelling, again, is a good idea. Images work really well if they're engaging. Personal stories behind the scenes, the algorithm really favors of authenticity. So you really want to think, what's the kind of content that grabs someone's attention? Videos, as long as they're interesting and they're probably short enough to not spend too much time on it. And also what's good with LinkedIn is text format works better than the other channels. So I wouldn't recommend just posting text on other channels, but on LinkedIn, we see that quite a lot. It's all about creating a story, make sure it's engaging, it's appealing, and it makes someone keep reading. Carousel posts also work really well. So this is when you see multiple images, one after another. And if you also want to post them, you might have seen that on the feed. An easy way to create that is you go, for example, on Canva or any other tool, you create a series of images, and you can just download it as a PDF. So this is a trick if you don't want to post them all at the same time and you want to have that carousel effect, you upload them as an image, as a document on LinkedIn. And if you haven't done it before, I'm happy to share some screenshots, but it's the kind of posts that work really well with engagement because there are multiple images. And if someone clicks on 3 images, it means like 3 clicks. So it's good for engagement. It's a nice way to see how someone engages with your content. And it's something that really gets someone's attention. Another thing that's really favored on the algorithm in the last few months is content that has comments. So it's not just about sharing updates about your campaign. You also want to think, how can I start a conversation? How can I create content that's interesting enough for my team, for my supporters, that they want to support it even more? So they want to share that, they want to like, they want to comment. And then what's also really useful is getting the team on board. So before you launch the campaign, you might want to share a few content ideas with your team to make sure that they also support you and they reach their own networks. Or if they want to support your own content, just doing it on their own, you want to share the best practices. So instead of just retweeting, reposting, you want to ask them to share their own thoughts. So it's not just about quickly sharing the post as it is, it's at least adding a couple of sentences to make sure that it counts as a new post. So this is just about the algorithm. It's making sure that it's seen as another post. And it also makes it more authentic. It makes it more engaging, because if the person spends even a minute to think of a sentence or two, it definitely makes it feel better and look better for their own audience. And it has more chances of engagement. So I'd love to hear how many of you use LinkedIn the last year. Have you noticed any difference? Because it really feels like I hear many nonprofits the last year have started using it more. And it doesn't always make sense. It doesn't mean that just because it had increased engagement, that it should be your first choice. But it's definitely something to explore if you feel that you want to tap a specific audience. Samara says, what I don't understand about LinkedIn, every post seems so long, like an article. Yes, this seems to be a trend the last few months, and that was about the long text format I explained. It doesn't always have to be this way. They tend to work well if it's good content, but it doesn't have to be every single post to be very long. And you want to think, what's the kind of content that my audience would find interesting? Even if it's twice a week, it's definitely a good idea to think. Sharon says we use it quite a lot. Rose, we use it regularly as well. I'd love to hear how you use it. What are the kind of posts that you're sharing that work well? Peter says, as a channel, seeing more engagement on LinkedIn. Seems to be the case for many nonprofits the last year. Tracy says, I'm really interested in how to post the carousel on LinkedIn. Can you help? I'm happy to share some screenshots afterwards with instructions. And if anyone's interested, I'm happy to share my email. It's pretty straightforward, but it's a hack that is not really clear on LinkedIn, which should be easy, really, but to make it a little bit more complicated. Jenny says, I'm trying to get us to use LinkedIn more, but I'm really struggling to get buy-in from trustees and other supporters to share, post our content. I think you might want to make a case, and I think it's a screenshot I'm sharing afterwards. Let me check. Yes, that's exactly the screenshot. So this is a report from Hootsuite posted last month, and it's about engagement rate on all the different channels, specifically for nonprofits. So I was really surprised to see LinkedIn being second right after Instagram and very close to Instagram. So you can make a case of how LinkedIn is really seeing increased engagement. It's a great channel to show your professional side and appeal to new partners, get the board and the trustees to share your content, and find new opportunities to talk about your campaign. If it's the second most engaging channel on social, it means that you really should give it a try. And I'm hoping that helps. Sarah said we use it a lot, but campaigns struggle to get traction. It might also be something to explore about LinkedIn. It's probably not the channel to share too many updates. So if you share 1 or 2 posts about your campaign, what's the kind of content that will make a difference? You might want to make it a little bit more professional. How can you appeal to a network who really uses the platform on a professional setting? Is it more about volunteering? Is it about making a difference? Is it about appealing to companies where you can make a difference this Christmas, support a charity rather than using the money in a different way? So you want to think, how can the messaging appeal a little bit more to the platform? Peggy says we use this very frequently, but find it's not best fundraising for us as corporates get involved before I can jazz it up. Peter says comments really help posts spread quickly. That's definitely true. And they say that if you see posts and comments for the first hour to get engagement, it probably gives a signal to the algorithm and it gets more reach. So you want to think, what's the kind of content that really makes it easy for someone to engage and ask questions and answers? Olivia says, I've heard that posts with links don't do well. Is that right? In many cases, it's true, but not necessarily all the time. So the thing with LinkedIn, and I think more channels are heading into that direction, is that all the platforms don't want you to leave their own channel. So they want you to stay there. So ideally, they want you to share content that doesn't involve links. And you might have seen on LinkedIn, there are many accounts, they share a post and they say link in comments, because the posts, when they involve a link, sometimes it stops the reach. So that's why they're trying to add it afterward in the comments. But it's not always the case. I've had posts with links that also worked well, but it's kind of like a best practice this year. Emma says we've just started using LinkedIn and have posted about our courses, which share across networks. I post on my personal page and I've been out on visits and tags. Yes, tagging people is also a good idea. You want to make sure that you do it in a way that makes sense. You don't want to make it look like spam. That if it's about the first person as new campaign, you can have some tags in the comments and thank your team, for example, or thank a partner, thank someone who's supporting you. So you want to think, what are the kind of tags that would really make a difference? Rose says, what's the ideal time to post across Facebook, LinkedIn, Insta, and X? Was told it was 12 p.m., but it's still the case. It really depends. I would say I'm usually aiming either for the start of the day or yes, around lunchtime. You probably don't want too late, but again, that's really best practices because things like Facebook or Instagram, we spend more time when we're also not working. LinkedIn is probably sticking a little bit more to the working hours. You want to see what works best for your account. Could be a starting point to experiment. Nick also says, same, ideal about 9 a.m. Jenny says Instagram is the highest for us, around 6 p.m. Perfect. And just to continue with the last section, and we can continue the conversation. So something that's really useful is to start right now and map out your channels. It's what we discussed. You might want to write down on a piece of paper, on a spreadsheet. This is a template I created. I'm happy to share that. Just to think, what are all the channels that you're currently active? What's the kind of audience you attract? What's the ideal frequency of what you're currently doing? And what are the types of content you're creating? So that's really useful, even if you spend half an hour of that, because it really makes you to think of every single channel that you have, how you're using it, and how it can be useful for your campaign. Or you might want to make it specifically about your campaign and think, what are the channels that I want to use? How can I really create the content that makes sense based on the audience that I'm using? And something that it's also a good idea right now, because obviously we always have too many channels, too many opportunities. We want to make sure that we spend the right time at the right audience and the right channel. So this is called an impact effort matrix. And I find it really useful when I have too many things working on and I need to find the ones I really need to focus. So you create this kind of template. I'm happy to share that and explain more. And it's split into 4 different areas. There are the quick wins, major projects, fill-ins, and thankless tasks. So you want to think, what are the things that take more time for me? What are the channels that I spend too much time and I don't necessarily think there is enough impact? Impact could be engagement, could be donations, could be links back to the website. What are the quick wins? Is there a channel that already works for me? And what are the major projects? So major project could be a campaign right now. So this is important. You want to create the right content. You want to spend the right time. So it's definitely a good exercise before you start the campaign to make sure that you're spending the right time on the channels that you have to. You can find more details here just to explain more, but I definitely recommend that as an exercise before the campaign. And let's focus more on the questions. That was more like the starting point, talking about social media. And as I said, if you have any questions, I'm happy to share my email.
Amazing. Thank you, Teresa, and lots of helpful insight, some of which I'll be taking myself. So as mentioned before at the start of the webinar, please do pop any additional questions in the Q&A box and we'll try to get to them whilst we can. There's one question from Hattie who says, we are going to start promoting the Big Give campaign this Friday. Do you think that's too early? She's not sure what other charities do.
Is there any recommendation on your end, Beth, or I'm happy to share in general with best practices?
Should we start with best practice and then go?
So in general, I would say, so this is now a month before the campaign. It's a good time. It's not too early. It's not September, for example, when you feel that people will forget it. You can share one post and then you can announce closer to the time. But it's good for people to know in advance, even with one post, that this year, starting at the 25th, 26th of November, you're joining Giving Tuesday and then the Christmas challenge. So people have that on the back of their heads. It doesn't mean that they're ready 1 month ago, that they're ready to donate, but it's still good and useful to mention that in advance, definitely a few weeks before.
Yeah, and what I would say is I have seen some charities starting to like put a post out just to say they are participating. I don't usually see regular posts going out. So I think, as Teresa mentioned, maybe one post just to announce you're starting. I know a lot of charities at the moment do start doing kind of the personal reach out. They might start hinting it in newsletters, things like that. But yeah, again, it really depends on your audience and what you think is best. There is a question here from Lisa that I saw. It said, is it possible for Big Give to share their social media plans with us in advance so we can schedule interactions with specific posts? So Lisa, we have a Trello board, which is linked in the resources section of the portal, which has like an overview of our plans, but we don't normally send out like specific times of when we're going to be sending out posts. We are very active throughout the whole week. So what I would say is that if you are posting, tag us in your posts and we'll try to reshare as much as possible to help you raise awareness about your individual campaigns.
Don't think there are any more questions. I think maybe give everyone a last chance if you want to ask a question. But I don't know if there are any like basic top 3 tips that you can give charities or something like that, that they can get started on for the campaign.
So we talked today about the most popular channels, so focusing on that again. Tomorrow, for anyone interested, we're talking more about emerging channels, so like from TikTok up to Threads and all the alternatives to Twitter. So tips keeping from today is probably start with the channels that work best for you. So if you're already active on Facebook and Twitter, this is where you need to focus on. So this is the way to figure out what works best. Go look at the analytics on Facebook, on all the other channels, and see what works best. It could be specific types of content. If videos work best, that's what you want to create for the campaign. But also think, where is my audience spending more time? What are the kind of things that I can create that really explain more about the campaign? So think about doubling the impact. How can I tell stories that are really make it different from any other time of the year where someone can really support me even more right now? So it's a month pretty much before the launch of the campaign. Have a think, how can I create content that's different from all the other posts that I'm creating?
I know Sama said that they don't have a marketing comms person. So what I would say as well is, as Teresa mentioned, maybe just focus on one key social media for this year. Maybe just, you know, at the start, think of a SMART goal, really want to boost our Instagram followers or be more interactive on Instagram, and have that as your goal. And at least you know then that you've achieved that and you're setting yourself a target that's achievable and not kind of putting loads of different tasks on your already really capacity time limited team. So yeah, try and focus on 1 or 2 if you can.
And for those who are running for the first time, I'm also happy to answer more questions. I just finished a course this month on campaign planning, so there is a lot of videos and templates I'm happy to share. Definitely don't have to be anxious. Yeah.
One final thing I'd probably add is reach out to volunteers, see who's in your network that can maybe help you. You don't know, like maybe someone in your team knows someone that had some bit of marketing experience that can lend some time. So yeah, just reach out to your network. I know there are a couple of places where you can also advertise for volunteers, so it's maybe just also worth like if reaching out to those types of networks to see how you can build a bit of that capacity in the short term.
And I've just added in the link to our Facebook group. I keep plugging this all the time, but I'm seeing charities use it more often. So it's a really great opportunity. If you haven't already, swapped emails in the chat to talk to other charities also in the same boat and swap ideas that way as well.
Are there any more questions? Are we good to wrap up? I think we can wrap up.
Yeah. Thank you again, Teresa, for your amazing webinar.
Thanks, everyone.
And a reminder, everyone, that we do have a second webinar on social media. Remind me when that is, Sahil.
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow, 12 p.m.
Great.
Perfect. So hopefully we'll see you all tomorrow. But in the meantime, have a lovely rest of the day.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.